In this War Master battle report, we try out an experimental army list, the Kingdoms of Ind, and they will be fighting against the Dogs of War at 2,000 points, with no additional scenario objectives. The Kingdoms of Ind lie far to the east of the Old World and south of the Kingdom of Cathay. Very few Old Worlders have made the journey to the Kingdoms of Ind, and it is a largely unknown country. The land itself features dense jungles, mighty rivers, and lofty mountains. It is a human nation, and the populace reside in very densely packed cities. Each city will have its own ruler who presides over their individual kingdom. The Kingdoms of Ind are often referred to as the Land of 1,000 Gods, where the reverence of deities, both minor and major, is an important part of everyday life. The various deities of Ind include some extremely powerful beings, capable of sending their avatars into the mortal plane to help their followers or to hinder their enemies. Therefore, the Indian army will feature human soldiers chosen from both the nobility and the warrior caste, and also the manifestations of Indian deities, which will fight alongside the humans, providing effective shock troops. Indian deities may also sometimes take a direct interest in a battle, altering its outcome as they see fit. For our battlefield, we place some Indian-themed terrain pieces and then scatter them randomly. This is the domain of Kali Ma, one of the more violent of Indian deities. There is one hill which is open ground to all units. It provides artillery with an elevated line of sight and provides infantry with defended status. There are 4 jungles which are dense terrain and block line of sight. They can only be entered by infantry and also grant defended status. There are a number of impassable features including ruins and the temple of Kali Ma itself. There are 3 ponds filled with bubbling blood which count as impassable terrain. There is a single village which is dense terrain but can be entered by all unit types. It blocks line of sight but grants infantry defended status. This cursed place is rumoured to hold many treasures, who are there for the taking for those brave enough to find them. Tall tales have been told in the Old World about the fabulous rubies to be had in the Kingdoms of Ind, and this is sufficient to lure Dutch Schaefer's mercenary band across the ocean and onto our battlefield. First, we shall look at the Indian army. The army features 9 troop types and 4 character types. The compulsory troops are 2 units of human archers per 1,000 points, who have the standard human missile infantry profile, and 1 unit of nobles who ride in chariots, again with the standard chariot profile. You also have an unlimited selection of human warriors who have the standard human medium infantry profile, and you may take up to 2 units of deity hosts per 1,000 points, which have the standard demon infantry profile. To add some variety, you may take some forest creatures, which are unarmoured shock troops. You can take unlimited numbers of chariots, and a very limited amount of light cavalry. Heavy cavalry comes in the form of deity riders, and you may take a single unit per 1,000 points, and they're identical to demon cavalry. You may also take units of elephants, which are identical to those in the Araby list. And finally, you have access to deity flyers, which are identical to demon flyers. You must take 1 human general, your Maharaja, and can take up to 2 heroes, or Raja, per 1,000 points, again with standard human hero profiles. You may take a single deity avatar character in the army, who's equivalent to a tree man, a giant terror-causing monster. The Purohitas, meanwhile, are standard human wizards. The human characters also have a choice of an elephant or chariot mount. Taking Purohitas gives you access to the spell list, which has some interesting entries. Woe to You is a close combat spell identical to Curse of Years. Thousand-Eyed Spies is a disruption spell which prevents 1 enemy unit from being ordered as part of a brigade. Tongues of Fire is the standard 30cm 5+ to cast shooting attack that ignores armour. And Summon Deities is identical to the spell in the Demon list, which allows you to restore lost stands to your deity units. The deity avatar also has access to this spell. For this battle we've chosen 4 units of archers, 2 units of warriors, 4 units of deity hosts, 2 units of noble chariots, 2 units of horsemen, 2 units of deity riders, 1 unit of elephants and 2 units of deity flyers. There is 1 Maharaja, 1 Raja, 1 deity avatar and 2 Purohitas. The general rides to battle in a chariot. Army breakpoint is 10. We shall be showcasing Jim's Indian army, and Jim is also the author of the list. The purple painted units are the deities, and they represent the bloodthirsty minions of Kali Ma. The human units meanwhile represent their fanatical worshippers, who seek to drive the invaders from their sacred lands. Next we look at the Dogs of War. This is Dutch Schaefer's mercenary band, who have sailed in their ship, the Chopper, to plunder the rich rubies of Ind. The army features 4 pikemen and 4 crossbowmen, 2 swordsmen, 2 ogres, 2 marauders, 2 light cavalry, 2 knights, 2 galloper guns and 1 unit of birdmen. It's led by Dutch Schaefer the General, 1 hero on a griffin who is Asanil the Dragon Lord, 1 paymaster on his paywagon who is Dylan, and 2 wizards. We have a Ring of Magic, a Dispel Scroll, and a Sword of Might. Both players select their scouting units and make a scouting roll. The Dogs of War have their birdmen and their flying character, plus 2 units of light cavalry. The Inns also have 2 units of light cavalry and their demon flyers.
Ooh, what big birds!
Those aren't big birds, sweetheart. They're giant vampire bats.
The Dogs of War win the scouting roll and deploy their scouts, cavalry and character on the right, and birdmen on the left. The Indian army now deploys in full, with their human troops massing on the right flank and the deity troops massing on the left. The Maharaja leads from the front atop his chariot, and he has the archers, the infantry and elephants, and the cavalry and chariots to command, assisted by his Raja. Meanwhile, the deity avatar and the Purohitas lead the deity infantry, the deity cavalry and the deity flyers. The Dogs of War now deploy their remaining forces. On the left flank, ogres, marauders, crossbows and swordsmen form up in line. The pikes deploy alongside the birdmen, whilst the artillery and remaining crossbows form up behind the hill. Meanwhile, the heavy cavalry join the light cavalry on the right. Dutch Schaefer takes command of the pikes and the artillery brigade. Asanil the Dragon Lord leads the cavalry, whilst Dylan commands the remaining infantry. The Indians take the first turn, and they begin the battle by rolling a dice to determine the effect of the battling deities rule. They roll a 6, and this allows them to re-roll any further d6 roll during the rest of their turn. In the orders phase, the Raja sends the Bowmen Brigade into the jungles to take up defendable positions. Meanwhile, the deity infantry moves forwards towards the village. The deity cavalry head towards the army's left flank. Whilst making use of the reroll afforded by the battling deities, the Maharaja orders the elephants and infantry towards the left, and the cavalry and chariots in a sweeping left flank manoeuvre. The Indian characters then reposition, ready for orders next turn. The Dogs of War respond by a left flank push with their infantry brigades. In the centre, the artillery brigade takes the hill and the pikemen move up to defend them, whilst on the right flank the cavalry push forward into a threatening position. Characters then reposition around the board to where they will be most needed next turn. In their second turn, the battling deities once again grant the Maharaja a reroll, and he decides that this is now the time to strike. On the left flank, the deity riders are ordered twice to charge into the light cavalry. They sustain light damage from the stand and shoot, and then charge home. Next, the deity flyers are ordered twice, firstly to get a line of sight to the artillery on the hill, and secondly to charge home. They also suffer light damage from stand and shoot, but all stands make it into combat. The light cavalry and chariots are then ordered further onto the left to attempt a flank charge into the Dogs of War cavalry, but that order fails. The deity avatar then moves to join the combat on the hill to cause terror in the human troops. And the remaining Indian characters then reposition, ready for orders next turn. In the shooting phase, a Purahita fires tongues of flame at the heavy cavalry behind the light cavalry. This is enough to drive them back, but does not confuse them. We then move to the combat phase with the deity cavalry fighting the Dogs of War light cavalry. The deity riders win the first round of combat decisively, causing heavy damage on the Dogs of War units, although they do take damage themselves. The light cavalry retreats and is pursued by the deity riders, who also win the second round of combat, leaving the light cavalry with a single stand remaining. They then elect to fall back in good order, ready for next turn. The retreating light cavalry forces the heavy cavalry to make way, which causes confusion amongst two units. In the battle on the hill between the flyers and the artillery brigade, things do not go the Indians' way, however, as the defended status of the artillery and infantry confounds the attacks of the deity units, leaving the humans unscathed. They then manage to kill a stand of deity flyers and win the combat, driving the flyers back. So at the end of their second turn, the Indian attack on the left flank has succeeded, but their push in the centre has failed. How will the Dogs of War now respond? The Dogs of War begin their second turn with the unconfused unit of knights using their initiative to charge the deity riders. The birdmen then home back towards the paymaster, bringing the demon flyers within bow range. The paymaster then orders the pike brigade forwards so that they won't get struck by cannonballs being shot at the flyers. Dutch Schaefer then makes 2 successful strings of 3 orders to each infantry brigade, resulting in the ogres taking the woods and the crossbowmen lining up to shoot at the deity infantry. Characters then reposition ready for next turn, with Dylan moving up behind the infantry, while Dutch Schaefer heads back towards the pikes and the artillery. At the end of the command phase, all confusion is removed, so one wizard takes advantage of this to use his ring of magic to cast Voice of Command on the free heavy cavalry. Volan's Venators now charge into the demon flyers alongside the other knights. The artillery and crossbowman brigade on the hill now unleash their firepower into the demon flyers, who were repulsed by them last turn. The demons lose a stand from both units and are driven back into the pikes, where they halt and are confused. In the combat phase, over 2 rounds of close combat, the deity riders are destroyed by the charging knights, although 1 unit of knights also loses a stand. The wounded knights then elect to fall back in good order, while the undamaged knights advance into the waiting chariot brigade. The knights manage to kill off 2 stands of chariots for the loss of a single stand themselves. After 2 rounds of combat, they elect to keep pursuing the chariots, forcing them to remain locked in combat for next turn. After 2 turns each, the Dogs of War have successfully repulsed the initial Indian assault, whilst taking considerable ground with their own infantry. But the Indian army still has plenty of tricks up its sleeve. The damaged units of demon flyers roll for instability at the start of turn 3, and 1 unit regains a stand. This turn the battling deities roll goes against the Indian army, and it is the Dogs of War that may force a reroll on them this turn. However, this cannot prevent 1 unit of Indian light cavalry from using their initiative to charge the flank of the engaged knights. Indian characters then issue orders, with the deity infantry leaving the safety of the village and charging into the flank of the light cavalry. The second unit of Indian light cavalry then moves up into the centre of the board, but the battling deities rule means that further orders are prevented this turn. In the shooting phase, one of the Purohitas successfully summons back a stand of demon flyers. And in combat, the deity infantry, assisted by the addition of the deity avatar, make short work of the Dogs of War light cavalry before advancing into a unit of knights. The knights are also cut down without loss, and the deity infantry then about face to threaten the flanks of the Dogs of War infantry brigades. On the Inden left flank, the charge of the light cavalry is enough to see off Volan's Venators, who are destroyed without further losses to the Inden units. At the end of the third turn, the Indens appear to have reversed the fortunes of the Dogs of War, removing 4 enemy units for no losses, whilst undoing a lot of the damage that the shooting had caused on the flyers last turn. At the start of Dogs of War turn 3, the missile infantry decide that direct action is required to get rid of the deity flyers. Therefore the crossbowmen charge down out of their defended position on the hill, whilst the birdmen charge into the flank. The ogres in the jungle are overcome with greed at the sight of this exotic variety of human and have to charge into close combat against the archers. The Inden archers hold firm and pepper the approaching brutes with missile fire, inflicting 3 hits. In the orders phase, Dylan uses his pay chest to try and encourage the second unit of ogres, who had no line of sight to the Indens previously, into combat. However, despite his boosted command value, the order fails and the ogres have to make do with ending their move 2 centimeters away from the Indens. In the centre, 1 unit of pikemen is ordered to charge into the light cavalry, sustaining 2 stand and shoot hits as they do so. The remaining pikemen form up facing towards the demon infantry, whilst keeping behind the demon flyers to cut off their retreat. The crossbowmen and accompanying swordsmen are also ordered to move closer to the demon flyers to cut off their retreat, whilst keeping the other demon infantry within crossbow range. In the shooting phase, a wizard casts Voice of Command on the second unit of ogres, who can now see the Inden bowmen, and they charge in, smacking their lips as they go. Elsewhere, the combined shooting of the crossbows and wizards removes 1 stand from the defended demon infantry in the village. The cannon and crossbowmen pour fire into the nearest unit of demon infantry. This causes 5 hits, and when the drive back is rolled, the unit is routed. In combat, the charging crossbowmen and birdmen, ably assisted by Asanil the Dragonlord, are sufficient to push the demon flyers back into the pikemen, and all the demon flyers are destroyed. Elsewhere, the single unit of pikemen fighting the light cavalry ends in a stalemate, and both sides fall back, having lost a stand. The close combat in the jungle proves a hard lesson for the ogres, who learn that you should never engage in a land battle in Asia. The defended Inden archers easily halt the advance of the ogres, and then retreat into the dense jungle. The defeated ogres are thrown back in disarray and have to console themselves by devouring the Inden casualties, which they discover have a pleasant spicy kick. At the start of Ind turn 4, the battling deities have no effect, so the elephants and their accompanying infantry are ordered twice to charge the Dogs of War crossbows. The crossbows stand and shoot, but can only cause a single hit on the elephants. The elephants go in first and form a battle line, so the infantry have to form up around them as best they can, and are unable to form full battle lines themselves. Elsewhere, the stranded unit of pikemen find themselves charged on 2 sides by the demon infantry and the Ind light cavalry. In the jungle, the Inden archers wisely keep a distance from the ogres and retreat further into the safety of the dense foliage. The remaining Inden units keep their distance from the enemy this turn, unwilling to come into cannon range. In combat, the deity infantry, accompanied by their avatar, make short work of the first unit of pikes and then advance into a second, destroying it also. A third unit is also caught up in this combat through incidental contact, and the demons pursue them. The elephants and accompanying infantry easily wipe out the crossbowmen they've charged, and then pursue the supporting swordsmen and kill them also. They are then able to advance into a second brigade of crossbowmen and swordsmen and lock them in combat. At the start of Dogs of War Turn 4, the brave crossbowmen on the hill use their initiative to charge the flank of the deity infantry and their avatar locked in combat against the pikes. A second unit of pikemen do the same, hoping that weight of numbers will be sufficient to bring the fiends down. The birdmen move up towards the flank of an unengaged Indian infantry unit, whilst the cannons size up their targets. Despite the exhortations of their general, the ogres once more refuse to venture back into the jungle and are content to sit down with their Indian picnic. As they are on a hill, the artillery can draw line of sight over intervening units to target the Indian infantry. The cannon fire plus the shots from the birdmen is sufficient to rout the Indian infantry in one go. In combat, once more Asanil the Dragonlord lends his prowess to the crossbowmen, and this is sufficient to bring down the remaining deity infantry and their accompanying avatar. Unfortunately, the remaining Dogs of War crossbows and swordsmen are cut down by the combined attacks of the elephants and the Indian infantry. Although the Indian units also take damage, they survive combat and reposition to set up flank charges next turn. In Ind Turn 5, once again the battling deities have no effect on the battle. The elephants now use their initiative to charge the flank of the birdmen, and a surviving stand of Indian infantry charges the flank of a pike unit. Instability takes its toll on a unit of deity infantry in the village, and they lose an extra stand. Light cavalry are then ordered to join the flank attack on the beleaguered pikes, and then the chariots and a second unit of light cavalry are ordered to charge the rear of the engaged pikes. The Indian general and a Purahita then join the combat, and in the shooting phase the Purahita successfully casts Woe to You to add 6 attacks. This combined charge led by the Indian Maharaja is sufficient to destroy both units of pikes, which brings the Dogs of War army to its break point. The Dogs of War army has lost 12 units in total, which is sufficient to cause them to withdraw. We then total up the victory points. The Dogs of War have lost 2 crossbowmen, 2 swordsmen, 4 pikemen, 2 light cavalry and 2 knights, to give the Ind player a total of 790. The Indian army, meanwhile, was only 2 stands away from reaching its own breakpoint of 10. The Dogs of War killed 1.5 units of warriors, 2 deity flyers, 2 deity riders, 2 deity infantry, half a unit of nobles, and the deity avatar. This nets them 800 points. So although the Dogs of War scored 10 more victory points than the Indians, because the Dogs of War withdrew, they are capped at the Indians' total of 790. This means the battle has resulted in a draw. So in this battle, Dutch Schaefer has failed to find the fabulous rubies of Ind, although the ogres have discovered a new culinary sensation, and as they stuff their bags full of the corpses of Indian archers, they have created the concept of the Indian takeaway. Meanwhile, the Indian tactics of sending the deity troops in to fight the Dogs of War first seemed to pay off, as the human troops suffered relatively light casualties. Hopefully this battle has given you a showcase of how the Indian army can work in practice. And as with any new army concept, it is essential to get as many games as you can to playtest the ideas you have created. The Indian Army playtest list is free to download from the Experimental Rules Forum, and I will include a link below.